Chapter 5. The Lord Mayor. 100 miles ahead, the sunrise shone on Circle Park, the elegant loop of lawns and flower beds that encircled Tier 1. It gleamed in ornamental lakes and on pathways glistening with dew, and it glittered on the white metal spires of Cleo House, Valentine's Villa, which stood among dark cedars at the park's edge, like some gigantic conch shell abandoned by a freak high tide. In her bedroom on the top floor, Catherine awoke and lay watching the sunbeams filter through the tortoise-shell wind shutters on her window. She knew she was unhappy, but at first she did not know why. Then she remembered the previous evening, the attack in the gut, and how that poor, sweet young apprentice had chased after the assassin and got himself killed. She had gone running after father, but by the time she reached the waste chute, it was all over. A young apprentice engineer was stumbling away, his shocked face as white as his rubber coat. And beyond him she found father, looking pale and angry, surrounded by policemen. She had never seen him look like that before, nor heard the harsh, unnatural voice in which he snapped at her to go straight home. Part of her just wanted to curl up and go back to sleep. But she had to see him and make sure he was all right. She flung back the quilt and got up, putting on the clothes from last night that lay all crumpled on the floor, still smelling of furnaces. Outside her bedroom outside her bedroom door, a hallway sloped gently downward, round-roofed, curling about on itself like the inside of an ammonite. She hurried down it, pausing to pay her respects before the statue of Cleo, goddess of history, who stood in a niche outside the door to the dining room. In other niches lay treasures that her father had brought back from his expeditions: potsherds, fragments of computer keyboards, and the rustling metal skulls of stalkers, those strange, half-mechanical soldiers from a forgotten war. Their cracked eyes stared balefully at Catherine as she hurried by. Father was drinking coffee in the atrium, the big open space at the centre of the house. He was still in his dressing gown, his long face serious as he paced up and down between the potted ferns. A glance at his eyes was enough to tell Catherine that he had not slept at all. "Father?" she asked. "What's happened?" "Oh, Kate." He came and hugged her tight. "What a night." "That poor boy," Catherine whispered. "Poor Tom. I suppose they didn't find anything?" Valentine shook his head. The assassin dragged him down with her when she jumped. They were both drowned in the mud of the out-country, or crushed beneath the tracks. "Oh," whispered Catherine, and sat down on the edge of a table, not even noticing Dog when he came padding in to rest his great head on her knee. Poor Tom, she thought. He had been so sweet, so eager to please. She had really liked him. She'd even thought of asking Father about bringing him up to work at Cleo House, so she and Dog could get to know him better. And now he was dead. His soul fled down to the sunless country, and his body lying cold in the cold mud, somewhere in the city's wake. "The Lord Mayor isn't happy," said Valentine, glancing at the clock. "An assassin loose in the gut on London's first day back in the hunting ground. He's coming down near here in person to discuss it. Will you sit with me while I wait for him? You can have some of my breakfast if you like. There is coffee on the table, rolls, butter." "I have no appetite at all." Catherine had no appetite either, but she glanced at the food and noticed a battered leather pack lying on the far side of the table. It was the pack the girl assassin had dropped in the gut last night, and its contents were spread out around it like exhibits in a strange museum, A metal water bottle, a first aid kit, some string, a few strips of dried meat that looked tougher than the tongues of old boots, and a stained and crumpled sheet of paper with a photograph stapled to it. Catherine picked it up. It was an identity form issued in a town called Stroll, filthy and faded and coming apart along the creases. Before she could study the writing, her eye was drawn to the photograph. She gasped. "Father! Her face!" Valentine turned, saw her holding the paper and snatched it from her hand with an angry cry. "No, Kate! That is not for your eyes. That is not for anybody's eyes." He pulled out his lighter and carefully lit a corner of the form, folding it into the ashtray on his desk as it burned. Then he went back to his pacing, and Catherine sat and watched him. In the 10 years since she arrived in London, Catherine had come to think of him as her best friend as well as her father. They liked the same things and laughed at the same jokes, and never kept secrets from each other. But she could see that he was keeping something from her about this girl. She had never seen him so worried by anything. "Who is she, Father?" she asked. "Do you know her from one of your expeditions? She is so young and whatever happened to her face?" There were footsteps, a knock at the door, and Pusey burst into the room. "Lord Mayor's on his way, Chief." "Already?" gasped Valentine. "Afraid so. Gench just saw him coming across the park in his bug. Said he didn't look pleased." Valentine didn't look pleased either. He grabbed his robes from the chair back where they had been flung and started trying to make himself presentable. Catherine stepped forward to help, but he waved her away, so she kissed him quickly on the cheek and hurried out, with the dog trotting behind her. Through the big oval windows of the drawing room, she could see a white official bug pulling in through the gates of Clio House. A squad of soldiers ran ahead of it, dressed in the bright red armour of the Beefeaters, the Lord Mayor's personal bodyguard. They took up positions around the garden like ugly lawn ornaments as Gench and one of the other servants hurried forward to open the bug's plastic lid. The Lord Mayor stepped out and came striding towards the house. Magnus Crome had been ruler of London for nearly 20 years, but he still didn't look like a Lord Mayor. The Lord Mayors in Catherine's history books were chubby, merry, red-faced men, but Crome was as thin as an old crow and twice as gloomy. He didn't even wear the scarlet robes that had been the pride and joy of other mayors, but still dressed in his long white rubber coat and wore the red wheel of the Guild of Engineers upon his brow. Those earlier Lord Mayors had had their guild marks removed to show they were serving the whole of London, but things had changed when Crome seized power, and even if some people said it was unfair for one man to be master of the engineers and Lord Mayor, they still admitted that Crome made a good job of running the city. Catherine didn't like him. She'd never liked him, even though he had been so good to her father. And she was not in any mood to meet him this morning. As soon as she heard the front door iris open, she hurried back into the corridor and started up it, calling softly for Dog to follow her. She stopped as soon as she was around the first bend, hidden in a shallow alcove, resting the tips of her fingers on the wolf's head to keep him still. She could tell that some terrible trouble had overtaken her father, and she was not going to let him keep the truth from her, as if she was still a little girl. A few seconds later she saw Gench arrive at the door to the atrium, clutching his hat in his hands. "This way, your worshipful honour," he mumbled, bowing. "Mind your step, your mayorness." Close behind came Crome. He paused for a moment, his head flicking from side to side in an oddly reptilian way, and Catherine felt his gaze sweep the corridor like a wind from the ice wastes. She squeezed herself tighter into the alcove and prayed to Quirk and Cleo that he would not see her. For a moment she could hear his breathing and the faint squeaks and creakings of his rubber coat. Then Gench led him into the atrium, and the danger was past. With one hand firmly on Dog's collar, she crept back to the door and listened. She could hear Father's voice and imagined him standing beside the ornamental foundation while his men showed Chrome to a seat. He started to make some polite comment about the weather, but the cold, thin voice of the Lord Mayor interrupted him. I have been reading your report of last night's escapade, Valentine. You assured me that the whole family had been dealt with. Catherine flinched away from the door as though it had burned her. How dare the old man talk to Father like that? She did not want to hear any more, but curiosity got the better of her, and she set her ear against the wood again. A ghost from my past, Father was saying. I can't imagine how she escaped. And Quirk alone knows where she learned to be so agile and cunning. But she is dead now. So is the boy who caught her, poor Natsworthy. Was sure of that? They fell out of the city, Chrome. That means nothing. We're travelling over soft ground. They may have survived. You've sent men down to check. Remember, we don't know how much the girl knew of her mother's work. If she were to tell another city that we have Medusa before we are ready to use it. I know, said Valentine irritably, and Catherine heard a chair creak as he flung himself down in it. I'll take the 13th floor elevator back and see if I can find the bodies. No, ordered Chrome. I have other plans for you and your airship. I want you to fly ahead and see what lies between London and its goal. Chrome, that is a job for a planning committee scout ship, not the elevator. No, snapped Chrome again. I don't want too many people to know where we are taking the city. They will find out when the time is ripe. Besides, I have a task in mind that only you can be trusted with. And the girl? Asked Valentine. Don't worry about her, said the Lord Mayor. I have an agent who can be relied on to track her down and finish the job you failed to do. Concentrate on preparing your airship, Valentine. The meeting was at an end. Catherine heard the Lord Mayor getting ready to leave and hurried up the corridor before the door opened, her mind whirling faster than one of the tumble dryers in the London Museum's Hall of Ancient Technology. Back in her room, she sat down to wonder about the things she had heard. She had hoped to solve a mystery, but instead it had grown deeper. All she was sure of was that Father had a secret. He had never kept anything from her before. He always told her everything, and asked her opinion, and wanted her advice. But now he was whispering with the Lord Mayor about the girl being a ghost from his past, and some agent being sent back to look for her and do what? Could Tom and the assassin really still be alive? And why was the Lord Mayor packing Father off on a reconnaissance flight amid such secrecy? And why didn't he want to say where London was going? And what on earth was Medusa?